Every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Some stories begin with questions, some begin with loss. All of them are rooted in love and the search for connection. This is Janet Monroe, and this is Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, a podcast where real stories take root and grow. Because the more we share, the more we understand, and understanding helps us grow. Now, here's Janet Monroe.
Hello, and welcome to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories. The roots represent the birth parents, the adoptee, and the adoptive parents, whereas the branches are all those others that are affected by adoption, such as the siblings, the aunts and uncles, friends, anyone else who becomes affected by these stories and whose stories make a difference to them. Today, we're shining a light on a journey filled with faith, patience, and the kind of courage that only grows when you open your home to children who need it most. Kayla always knew she wanted to be a mother. At a church retreat, she prayed for children and wondered why the answer hadn't come. What she didn't know was that her path to motherhood would begin with foster care and one phone call that would change her life forever. This is Kayla's story, a journey from foster mom to forever mom. So Kayla, welcome. It's so good to see you again. Loved your story when you told it to me, and now we're here to tell it to everyone else so they can all understand what it takes to go from foster care to adoption. So take us back to that original church retreat. And what were you feeling in that moment when you were praying for children?
Yeah, so I had looked into becoming a foster parent about 3 times prior to this event. And this was in 2017, February of 2017. And I was at a women's retreat in Glacier National Park, and it was a beautiful setting, but I was kind of bitter because I had thought I'd managed to get to a place where I could become a foster mom, but then some life changed and we had to move. So I was a little bit angry and bitter and upset that I was having to move, and I thought losing my chance to become a foster mom again. And so during the quiet reflection time and prayer time, they ask you to say, there's somewhere in the Bible about where we get called by a special name, and they encouraged us to ask what that special name was. And for me, all I could hear very clearly was little mama. And I was ticked because I was like, what a mean joke. Like, I'm never going to become I had stepkids, but they were older, 10 and 14 when we got married. And I love babies and always desired to have a baby that I could call my own. And so anyway, it was as clear as could be as I was arguing in my mind in quiet time. What I heard really loudly was, "You never fully trusted me." And that was very convicting to me because it's true, I hadn't. I kind of was like, yeah, someday, somehow I'm going to become a mom, but I was always trying to manipulate everything and make it happen. And I never fully trusted. I always had a lot of doubt. And so during that retreat, it was just very, very clear that I needed to change my heart and my attitude and just be open and have faith that it was going to happen someday. So it's pretty powerful.
So what led you and Terry to say yes to foster care as a first step toward building a family?
I'm not exactly sure. Both of my sisters were foster parents, but I kind of had looked into the journey long before. I never really desired to be pregnant necessarily. That's never been something that I was passionate about. I just really wanted to be a mom. And so with the number of kids out there in the foster care system that needed parents and safe places to live, it just seemed like a good opportunity. And my husband was a respiratory therapist, and he worked in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit, and saw a lot of babies, drug affected babies and so forth that, were being born into not great circumstances. And that always had kind of tugged on his heartstrings a bit. So he was open to it, and he knew I wanted littles of my own. So um, we just seemed like the right thing to do. So we were open to it.
I was reading an article yesterday about fostering, and the woman was talking about two kinds of foster parents, the ones that get attached and the ones that don't, and the difference that that makes to the child. How do you feel about what? Obviously, from talking to you, you were one that got attached.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know all of the stances on it, but in my perspective and what I recall from foster parent training was if you don't get attached, you're not doing it right. So, like, in order for those kids to be attached and to feel safe, that attachment has to be there to whatever capacity the child can attach. So, you don't force it on them, you don't tell them what to call you, you don't do any of those things, but I had one foster baby for a total of 4 days, and I still pray for her and think about her. And in my tattoo that I got, she's a little daisy in there, even though I only had her for 4 days because it's a bouquet of all my kids' favorite flowers. So, yeah, I would say I definitely got attached, but I think that is what they need. They need someone to attach and never give up on them.
I think that's difficult when you have to give the child back,
Oh, yes,
right?
it is. Very, very
Hard.
difficult. Mm-hmm.
So originally you fostered 3 children for
Mm-hmm.
3, 10, and 11 months. So what did you learn emotionally from saying goodbye each time?
Yeah, so just going back a tiny bit after that, you never fully trusted me. That was February, and then in June, I got a call from my sister that said the baby isn't doing well, and I was like, "What baby?" I had no idea. And she had foster kiddos and 9 at the time, 9 children total, and they asked her if she would take a biological half sibling to her kids that she was a guardian of. And she said, well, no, I have 9 kids, but my sister is a working on becoming a foster mom. She's a registered nurse and her husband is a respiratory therapist. And they would probably love to take this medically fragile, drug affected baby. So that was that was right after Mother's Day, May 17th of 2017. We got our first baby, went into the NICU with an empty car seat, got this little 1-month-old infant after we learned how to do all of her equipment and things. And that was our first baby. And then 2 months later, they said, you have one baby girl. Would you like another baby girl? And we said, oh, sure. Okay. And so we got Evey, our second foster baby, and she was only 1 month old when we got her. And then 2 months later, they said, hey, you have 2 babies. Would you like another baby? And we said, sure. And at the time, I was working full-time night shift at a local hospital, so 3 12-hour shifts a week. And so my husband was home with the 3 babies. And so we had all 3 of them for a period of 3 months. And then when 2 of them were crawling, it was clear my husband was outnumbered. When they're all in bouncy seats, it's easy. But when, 2 are mobile, it's trickier. So the little boy we had for a couple months ended up going to another foster home, but they had found one at that time for him to go to. And so losing him wasn't as tricky because we weren't as attached. I mean, he was 6 months old when we got him. So loved him, enjoyed him, have pictures, but that wasn't too tricky. When the 10-month mark came around for Evey, who we'd had essentially all of her life, and she returned to a parent, and then 2 weeks later, our first foster baby returned to a parent. That was the most devastating thing I think I've ever been through. So I went from no babies and doubting God to 3 babies and feeling totally fulfilled and loving it to no babies, basically overnight. And so I would say emotionally, that was probably my rock bottom in my lifetime at the time, letting go of those babies. I remember with the one who was medically fragile, I sat in the hotel room the night before I had to give her back to her mom. We had a doctor's appointment in Portland. And so that night I just sat on the bed holding this little 11-month-old baby that I loved more than anything and just crying and praying over her. And it was devastating. But thankfully, fast forward, she's now 8 years old. I still have a relationship with her. She lives with the grandma. But that moment was one of the hardest things I'd ever been through. So it was tricky.
How did you and Terry support each other through these transitions?
We really just kind of clung to each other. We actually moved back to a little town that we had lived in previously. we'd been away for 4 years, and we moved back, got physically out of the area where we would be in the house that had 3 babies, to a new location. There, we didn't have all those memories. Every time I'd walk in the empty room, it would be very sad. But literally, our last baby returned on a Monday, and that Thursday we had packed up and moved. So that was very helpful to physically get away from the memories. But it was pretty tricky. Yeah.
So after those children returned home,
Mhm.
you had to wait until something happened again. So what was that time like for you? As you just said, you moved and you got, and you start, and then you got a call, right?
I did, yeah. So like I said, it was rock bottom, really emotional. I remember my job interview, they're like, tell us about a hard situation in your life. And I was like, oh, you mean right now? It's like the hardest thing I've ever gone through, losing my babies. And thankfully we had a relationship with the biological parents. So we were still getting phone calls and videos, and they were still reaching out to get advice on the babies. So those were things I was grateful for, to still have that connection. But 3 months go by, and so now here we are, and it's July, and we got a phone call that said, hey, would you be willing to take Evey, our second foster baby that we'd had, back, and then would you also take her 2-month-old or 4-month-old half sister and her 2-year-old stepbrother? And we said, of course, sure, here we come. And so we drove back to the town we moved away from, which is 6 hours away, and we picked up the girls. And then later that week, we went and picked up Ollie, our little guy, and brought them home. So I went from no babies to 3 babies to no babies to 3 babies. So I had a newborn, a 10-month-old, or an 11-month-old, and a 2-year-old. So it was quite surprising, but it was a wonderful blessing. So we had to rearrange our life real fast.
So once again, you had to adjust to 3 siblings in your home, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you had those siblings for 2.5 years?
Yep. About 2.5 years, we had all 3 of them. And yep. And for the littlest girl, she never knew she was even in foster care because she was only 4 months. So totally normal, happy, healthy kiddos. And it was great.
So what moments stand out the most, like the joyful ones and the challenging ones during that time?
The first birthday party, taking pictures of the 6 months, and their first tooth, and just being able to kind of capture those things with at least the little baby. Even though I'd had other babies before, everyone is special and everyone is different. And for her, she didn't really have a chance at anything else before we got her. Life was kind of just a blur, I think. And so just having that attachment and that ability to just have these 3 amazing kiddos. Halloween, dressing up 3 kids for Halloween, for those 2 years, was awesome. And the hard times were really with foster parenting. The goal is always to return to parent until it's not. And so even though we had these kids, and for Evey, it was the second time we had her, the plan was still return to parent. So even though we were 6 hours away, every month we would drive 6 hours and do visitation in person with the biological parents. And then we would do video chats as well. And, as hard as it was, like developing a relationship with the biological parents as they were figuring their stuff out, it's really tough because I know what's best for them would be to stay with us while the parents figure themselves out. And I'm attached, so I want them forever, but I know that they are their children. And termination of parental rights is ridiculously expensive and difficult. And if they have a shot at getting their kiddos back and they can do what they need to do to keep them safe, then that's great. They should get to have their kids back. But it's just, it's a challenge, and the kids have to decompress after every visit. So there's usually a 1 to 2 days where their behaviors are different, and there's struggles and challenges because it's emotional for them to have to be pulled in 2 different families as opposed to kids that aren't in the system.
So 2 of them returned to their maternal grandparents. How did you help Evey navigate that transition?
Yeah, so the big difference with the 3 kiddos was Evey had a different biological mom than the other 2, and so the grandfather of the mom of Ollie and Abby got to take them back, and so they letting go of them was ridiculously hard. It was during COVID, so we couldn't visit as much as we would have liked, but one of the hardest things was the first visit down. Abby was looking at me, or she wouldn't look at me. She was 2.5, but here in this little girl's mind, I kept her sister and I gave her away. which, in her little mind, I'm sure she felt rejected. And even though Ollie was with her, he was a little older. So I think he kind of understood a little more. But that was one of the hardest things ever with her. And then Evey just kind of was happy and content. We realized on a weekend when we just had her, we took her to Portland. I have pictures from that weekend. She was a different kid. She went from being a middle child to an only child. And night and day difference. She just flourished under that, being the only kiddo with us. And we realized that might be what's in her best interest, is to be an only child, just based on the trauma that she had in her early life. And those 3 months we didn't have her. So she rode with it pretty well. I think it was a lot harder on the other two, and on me and my husband.
What was your relationship like with the biological family during that time?
Yeah, it varied. You have to, I'm quite a bit older than the biological parents. So I think that was a blessing that I'd lived a little longer. And so kind of had some more maturity. But I did realize that I could never actually read the whole report of what brought the kids into care, because then I knew, it's kind of like as a nurse, they say, if you're taking care of prisoners, never look up what they did, because you won't be able to compassionately care for them. Like, I learned that early in my career. I've lived by that for 23 years. And I just knew I couldn't know it all, or I wouldn't be able to be as compassionate and willing to let the kids go back. So I was just always trying to be kind and encouraging and let them have access to the kids whenever they needed it, as long as the kids were up for it. And so I kind of took on a mentoring role with Evey's parents, and with her dad. Her mom wasn't in the picture, but her dad, video chats and that sort of thing. So I knew him and his extended family. I had arranged meetups at McDonald's, or when we were in town, would try to let them see her, have celebrations, and I would be there because I'm her, adopted, or her foster mom. Like, she's wherever she is, I am. But I would go and try to slide into the background so they could have time with her, because she is their family also.
Tell us about the message from the biological father that you got in March of 2021.
So I was right after a visitation where he had driven the 6 hours to come and see her. And he had another baby at the time that was with him physically as well, a younger sibling than even, that was younger. Evey was 4 at the time, or almost 4. And he sent a long message, he asked if he could send me a message. And I was like, of course, feel free. And so he sent me this message. And I remember I was in the DHS parking lot when I got the message, and I opened it and read it. And it was pretty lengthy. But essentially, I had no idea what it was going to be. I was kind of like, oh, what now? Kind of a mentality of like, oh, do we have to go back to Bend? Do we have, what is happening? And it was a very, very heartfelt, deep, kind message. He included apologies for and took accountability for some of the decisions he'd made that had affected Evey's life in the way it had. And he shared that he realized that the best, most loving thing he could do for her was to allow us to adopt her, because that would be in her best interest, and that he hoped he could still have a relationship with her, but he knew that's what he needed to do. So that I was in my car bawling my head off, of course, and texting my husband and calling my husband like, you won't believe what happened. So that was the beginning of the journey to change her plan from return to parent to the plan of adoption.
And how did that journey progress?
It was interesting. We went to the 6 hours away for the court hearing, and we thought it was going to be another long, kind of drawn out process, because there were 5 lawyers involved, the state, and then each kid had their lawyers, plus the parents each had their lawyers. So there were 5 attorneys in this case the whole time. So everything took a long time, but it was a really quick, short and sweet, and the judge just reviewed everything, and she officially changed the plan from return to parent to adoption. And so we got in the car, and we were kind of giddy and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that actually happened. And we had all 3 kids, and we were headed back up home, and we stopped at a McDonald's, and I was like, we have to take a picture of this. I meant to send it to you, but I will. But it was just like to commemorate these giant smiles on our faces, because it was finally like a dream come true, because we knew at that point it was in her best interest. All things considered, more kids were in the picture. She just needed to be locked in and not bounced around anymore. So that happened in March, and then her adoption was finally finalized the following that November. So
how has becoming Evey's forever family changed you as a person?
Oh my gosh. I am just grateful every single day. Like, I think about her, I see her. I'm going to get a little emotional, but she's, she's the light of our life. And the other two kids, God brought them back and they live near us now. And they're in the process of being adopted by some good friends of ours. And all three kids are still fully brothers and sisters. So I'm Mama Kayla to my other two that I had for 2.5 years at school, Mama Kayla, and just hugs, and they'll just call me mom, and they call their soon to be adoptive mom. And so they just have multiple moms, and same with my husband. And but having Evey as our forever child, I remember I was teaching a CNA class about 7 hours from home, and my husband called and he said, "Hey, guess what?" And I said, "What?" And he says, "Congratulations." He's like, "You're a mom." And he sent me the picture of the birth certificate where it had mother and it had my name on it. And I just cried, and my students cried, and we ordered pizza. And I wished I had been home, but I also didn't want to wait for that. But that was a big moment for me. And so just, every day, I'm just grateful every day. She's 8 now, and 8.5. And I just can't really even put into words how much of a blessing she is. And just to be able to be a mom. My mom did the best she could. I'm the youngest of 4, but having my own child kind of has given me an opportunity to do the things that I wish had happened in my life. So I'm able to be the kind of mom I wish I'd had. And I love my mom dearly, but to be able to make a difference in this little girl's life and the other two as well has been a huge blessing. Most important job of my life.
You said to me at one point that it takes the village to raise the children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really, we live in a tiny community of our county has 7,000 people. So the kids were here for 2.5 years. They are residents of this village. And so when they came back, there's people all over that know and love these kids and have seen them since they were tiny. And so to have them back, it was kind of a Christmas miracle that the other two came back right before Christmas last year. So it's and they're all here, and they have a lot of safe people in their lives, and they have their relationships with their biological families as well. So nobody in this picture has ever kept anyone from being part of the kids' lives if they wanted to be. They're the adults, not the kids. It's not the kids' job to establish relationships with the bio families. It's the bio family's job. But they are still connected, and they have ties, and they're welcome in as part of their lives. So I think that's the village, everywhere you go. And on Evey's adoption party, I said, I made little sticks from Etsy, or I bought them, that said, "Thank you for being part of Evey's village," and put them in little succulents that everybody could take, because it does take a village. We had to have a lot of support during that really challenging 4 years.
What do you wish more people would understand about foster to adopt journeys?
I think one of the things that stood out to me is there really is no foster to adopt. Fostering is, now they call them resource parents, not foster parents, but essentially the plan is you keep the kids safe while the parents do what they need to do to get them back. Ultimately, that doesn't always happen. So then you do have an opportunity to adopt the kiddos. But I think if you go into the mindset, for us, for example, we fully anticipated adopting that medically fragile baby we got first. We thought, oh yeah, of course we're going to get to adopt her. Well, we didn't. We ended up, we have a relationship with her. Grandma's raising her, but we ended up adopting Evey, who we thought parents just needed some parenting classes. It would be short and sweet, so you just never know what the journey is going to be. But I would say my biggest encouragement to anyone in this process would be to maintain a positive relationship with biological family as best you can. Because in the event you do lose them and they do return, it would be far more devastating if you didn't get to still see them and be a part of their lives and have that relationship. So I was really grateful, as hard as it was, that we've always maintained that relationship and that open door to them. I think that made a big difference, and it makes a big difference in her life. She'll ask questions sometimes like, about her biological family. And I appreciate that I can just get on Messenger and text her dad and ask questions, or her grandma and ask questions. And so that's something I would just strongly encourage anybody, as hard as it is, if you can maintain that open, positive relationship. I think it's in the best interest of the kiddos, and as long as it's not toxic and harmful,
For those people that are looking to adopt, would you suggest fostering first as a way towards getting adoption, or it's so difficult today?
Yeah, it's expensive, honestly. I mean, you can, that was one thing because we thought about adopting, I mean, my husband's quite a bit, 14 years older than me, and biological kids wasn't necessarily in the cards for us. But I, looked into adoption international and within the United States, and it's $20,000. Like, unless you have that, it's really difficult. Whereas if you foster, it's free, so to speak. So it's a matter of if you're looking for a sibling group or anything and you can adopt through foster care, that's one big advantage. And then they have adoptive parent resources that they also, you have access to. Like, we can go to state parks anywhere in the US for free because we adopted through foster care, which is really fun and cool. It's a little perk, but it's a nice thing. It's a way of giving back so we can get our family out there. And being an adoptive parent just means that through foster care, every single foster child in the United States system is considered a special needs child. And I didn't realize that before, but the reason is they wouldn't be in foster care unless they've been neglected or abused. And so that makes them have special needs. So they get to jump the line at Head Start and other things. And when you find out what resources are available to them, those are some of the benefits. Like Oregon Health Plan, for example, we get for her because she was in the foster system. But based on her income, we would be paying for private insurance. And so even though she's adopted now, she'll have Oregon Health Plan until she's an adult, which is really helpful financially month to month. So there's little perks to doing it through foster care, but you always run the risk of losing them back to the system or back to the family or back to parents. So it's not for the faint of heart. It's very challenging when that happens, but when you get a happy ending like ours, it makes it all worth it. But
you said the approximate cost for adoption was around $20,000 when you were looking. Some people think that adoption is a legal form of human trafficking.
Really? I don't share that view necessarily. I mean, if they're stealing babies and selling them, that would be one thing. But as far as adoption goes, like if I knew a teenage girl that got pregnant and didn't want to terminate but wanted to give her baby up for adoption, that's a less expensive way to do it, right? So it's not human trafficking, but it would be essentially, legal fees. And, that would be all that it costs if you have a known person. And I do know quite a few adoptive parents that they became adoptive parents through a situation like that, somebody they knew or somebody from church or whatever the case may be. So I think every situation is different, but I think for adoptive parents, the most lovely, for people who give their kiddos up for adoption, if it is the right thing. I mean, even Evey's mom, who we don't have a real relationship with, although she knows the door is always open, the most loving thing, she carried her for 9 months. She brought her into this world. I mean, I wouldn't have my daughter if she hadn't have done that and then been willing to let us adopt her. She made that choice far before the father did, and that's the most loving thing she could do. So I feel like as an adoptive mom, that's my job, to let her know your mom loved you enough to let us raise you. But she will, that's just proof of her love and proof of your dad's love. And so it's going to get hard as she's a teenager. We know that, right? Everybody knows teenagers are hard. And for adoptive kids and parents, I understand it can be even more challenging because there's a lot of identity things and stuff that's going to pop up. So I'm just trying to enjoy the little things now and make the most of them and be prepared and set a good foundation. So when those rocky times come, that village is around to help support her and that she's going to be as well equipped as she can possibly be to navigate it, healthily and safely.
I had some rocky times with my 15-year-old daughter, so I could probably do a whole podcast on with no problems. But we'll see
Maybe calling you in a few years.
Yeah, you can call me when she's 15 and I can tell you stories, or my daughter can tell you stories.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. So for families considering fostering or adopting siblings, what guidance would you give?
For sibling groups particularly, I would just say each kid is a very special kid. I've seen where, there's 3 or 4, and then the youngest, or the middle child gets a lot of the attention and the pull. And if you adopt a sibling group when you already have biological children, I've seen that with my sisters, that has an interesting impact on the biological kids that now have multiple siblings from another family that's part of their family. So I would just say making sure that none of the kids get lost in the shuffle. is really important. And knowing there have been situations where a sibling group of 3, a family could only adopt 2. Like even in my kids' situation, I would love to adopt all 3, but it just wouldn't work for our family for health reasons and other reasons. So we're really lucky they get to live like cousins basically and see each other at school every day. But just maintaining that relationship, even if you can't adopt them all, but making sure they stay connected with their biological siblings. Evey now at the age of 8 has 5 younger siblings, biological half siblings. So I get as much information as I can about those kiddos, just like names and things, and who their parents are, so that when she wants to know that someday, I have that information for her versus be like, yeah, I have no idea who your siblings are or where they're at. So another reason to maintain relationships with the bio family is to, as it grows, to continue to keep her connected, because she is part of that family too.
Looking back, how do you see your prayer from that church retreat answered?
Oh gosh, every day, every single day. I have a picture of all 3 car seats when I had all 3 babies. Like when I finally believed, it was like baby, 2 months later, baby, 2 months later, baby. I was just like, okay, I get it. I really should have trusted you sooner. And so, and things like with my business and my career, it's like I just really learned that, he has a plan and I don't get to know what it is. But when I fully believe it's going to go well, and when I drag my feet and try to manipulate things, it's going to be a lot harder. My intention someday is to write a book about all of this when we have the conclusion of, when Ollie and Abby are locked into their forever home. I didn't feel like I could even make their baby photo books until I knew where they were going to end up. So I packed them around in my iCloud forever, but finally just this last year, I made them with their new adoptive last name to be on there. And it felt really good to go back and put that all together. And, if I die tomorrow, like that prayer has been fully answered. And I know that these kids all know I love them. And that is all that I could ask for. So hope I don't die tomorrow. But if I do, at least I know they know that their mama loved them.
And that's what I see when I talk to adopted moms. It's the unconditional love that just spurts out, they can't hold it back. For the adopted moms that I've spoken to, and some of them, tears come to my eyes when I hear that, because it's the way I feel for my own children, right? And that's the way adopted children, they are your own children.
Mm-hmm.
And that even though they're not biologically, you still have to consider the biological family, but to you, they're your children.
Yep.
And that's so important, so that they know that, and they know that they're special to you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Kayla, for sharing a story filled with faith, hope, and love, and the courage to open your heart again and again. Stories like yours remind us that family can grow in unexpected, beautiful ways, often through people we're called to love. If today's story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share this episode of Roots and Branches Stories. You never know who needs to hear it. Thank you for helping, or for sharing the stigma of adoption with others.
Thank you for tuning in to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, where every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Got an adoption story you want to tell? Want to learn more about adoption stories? Then visit rootsandbranchesadoptionstories.com.